Section on hubris. McIntosh and Rima contend that the dark side of leadership consists of pride, selfishness, and self-deception, and is preceded by the conditions of 1, a vague sense of ambition, 2, a profound need to be approved, 3, an irrational fear that their work is not adequate, 4, a need to feel in absolute control of every circumstance and event, and 5, a tendency towards perfection. Cheng defines hubris as dominance, aggression, and disagreeableness, arrogance, a sense of superiority, and conceit. Hayward described hubris not as dominance as did Cheng, Tracy, and Henrik, but rather Hayward contends that hubris is a high level of confidence, usually turning into overconfidence. Mark 7:22 used the word hubrophaneia to describe the pride of self that comes from within the person. Jesus presented to his audience the evils that defile a person. Thus, it's not what is said about a person that results in pride, but what the person begins to believe about himself. This may be akin to believing your own press. This also ties to self-evaluation and self-development. Goldman, Bosaccio, and McKee posit that hubris in leaders results in leaders creating dissonance with followers and removing any hope of pride or positive self-esteem that the followers may have in their work or toward the firm. This would contribute to the followers' sense-making about the organization. Section on narcissism. Paul wrote in 2 Timothy 3:2, speaking of the last days, "For men will be lovers of self, boasters." This combination of the Greek philantos and alzon carry a sense of being narcissistic. Schimmel wrote that Gregory the Great attributed to pride as being the mother of all vices. Aquinas, in his answer to Objection 2 of Article 2 of Question 84 of the Summa, contends that beginning of pride is the apostasy, dissatisfaction or abandonment from God. Augustine claimed in his literal commentary on Genesis that pride is the base of all sin and was the reason for the fall of Satan from heaven. This may be related to Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Reno, in his examination of Augustine's work and Augustine's concern that pride is a source of all sin, questioned Augustine's determination that the negative form of pride is not pride, but rather idolatry. Quote, "Nonetheless, when I step back and consider the larger sweep of Scripture, it becomes crushingly obvious that overwhelming emphasis falls on the dangers of idolatry and slavery to falsehood, not pride and fantasies of self-sufficient or self-directed life," end quote. Rosenthal and Pekinski state that narcissism is a personality trait encompassing grandiosity, arrogance, self-absorption, entitlement, fragile self-esteem, and hostility. It's an attribute of many powerful leaders. Narcissistic leaders have grandiose belief systems and leadership styles and are generally motivated by their needs for power and admiration rather than emphasis or emphatic concern for the constituents and institutions that they lead. However, narcissists also possess the charisma and grand vision that are vital to effective leadership. That's a direct quote from page 617 of their work. Fisher posits that narcissism is an extreme concern for self with no concern for others, as the narcissistic leaders seek to gain the end result with no concern for what means may be used. According to Fisher, narcissistic leaders will deny wrongdoing and will deny or downplay any data or information that puts them in a poor light. Narcissism is not all bad, according to Gabriel and Griffiths, who claim that some narcissism is fine since it contributes to one's self-esteem. Ziegler-Hill describe a progression from a high level of self-esteem to aggression or hubris to self-enhancement strategies, which refer to narcissism. Braithwaite, Ahmed, and Braithwaite contend that shame and pride go hand in hand as a balance or a continuum, in that shame represents a state of personal failure, while pride represents the emotion of achievement. Braithwaite, Ahmed, and Braithwaite go on to state that pride may take on two forms: a healthy self-respect or self-aggrandizement leading to a sense of superiority. Going further, Braithwaite, Ahmed, and Braithwaite point out that self-aggrandizement may lead to a state of narcissism in which the leader attempts social dominance in the organization. Thus, we see a progression of conditions that, left unchecked, can move from the healthy aspects of pride to the destructive aspects. Brown extended the theory of narcissism from the individual to the organization in an effort to explain how organizations act as a whole. Brown stated that narcissism consists of 6 behaviors: denial, rationalization, self-aggrandizement, attributional egotism, sense of entitlement, and anxiety. These 6 behaviors can be seen at both the individual and dysfunctional organizational level. The value of Brown's 6 behaviors lies in the self-discernment or others' discernment of self. Paul, in Romans chapter 1, explains that God will give the reprobate over to their own sins, and includes in verse 30 the word hubrephaneos as part of a long list of evil actions that should carry the penalty of death. These are strong words and show the gravity of narcissistic pride. Halligan examined narcissism through the lens of Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islamic faith traditions in an effort to understand spiritual pride. Halligan defined spiritual pride as seeing oneself too pridefully spiritual. Thus, it seems that even in doing good, one can begin to love oneself too much. Section: Continuum of Humility as a Virtue to Pride as a Vice. The literature shows 6 categories or levels of pride: joy, esteem, confidence, haughtiness, hubris, and narcissism. The first 3 of these may overlap with humility. Humility, according to Winston and Tucker, is a virtue that lies between the 2 vices, lowly and haughty. By combining Winston and Tucker's claim with the literature reported in this paper, we can see a continuum moving from humility through the first 3, and then moving on into haughtiness, hubris, and narcissism. Section: How leaders might conduct a self-evaluation regarding pride in themselves. Hayward described hubris not as dominance, as did Cheng, Tracy, and Henrich, but rather, Hayward contends that hubris is a high level of confidence, usually turning into overconfidence. Hayward offers 4 questions leaders must ask of themselves. 1. Why am I doing this? Who am I trying to impress, if anyone? Am I acting out of grounded or inflated view of my capabilities? Second, am I getting the right input for this decision? Do I have someone I trust who can tell me when I am wrong? Am I the best person to make this call? 3, am I really working as hard as possible to get prompt and accurate feedback? Am I shutting down people who see things differently? 4, have I tried to imagine the worst thing that could happen if I am wrong? Do I know right now what I would do if I were wrong, and how long would it take? Those are direct quotes from their paper. Katz DeVries promotes the use of an organizational fool, and he likens this role to the court jester, or the sage fool in Katz DeVries' words. This organizational fool is one who is able to use humor to point out the failings of the king. While the prophet Nathan did not use humor, he did show King David the hubris and narcissism in David's life. An organizational leader may want to use a consultant as a sage fool. This concept of the sage fool ties well to the Romans 12 motivational gift of perceiving. When hubris or narcissism are the operating modes of the leader ceases to lead but begins to rule, resulting in followers becoming subjects. The presumption here is that leaders have followers and rulers have subjects. Subjects behave in ways that either support the leader's haughtiness, hubris, and narcissism, such as in the fable of the emperor's new clothes, in which the subjects are unwilling to tell the king that he has no clothes, or in groupthink, in which no one is willing to challenge the ruler's thoughts for fear of retribution. Thus, the organizational leader either needs to carefully self-evaluate or use the perceiver's services and allow someone else to point out the leader's flaws. While Proverbs 27:2, let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips, indicates that praise is good. It can become bad if the leader begins to believe his own press. Paul presents a view of a person who lives by faith in Romans 3:21-27, and states that a person who lives by faith does not boast as would a person who lives by law. Paul contends in this passage that a person's self-value is in his faith in Jesus, rather than in the physical works that a person does. This is not to say that a person does no works, since James says that faith without works is dead in James 2:17-26, but rather a person does works because of his faith and does not boast of them. Thus, one can include as part of a self-evaluation whether or not he or she boasts of work or not. Boasting is not the reporting, although boasting does report. Rather, boasting is the unnecessary recitation of accomplishments as a means of creating a higher opinion of oneself in the minds of others. May our prayer be that of Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor my eyes haughty, nor do I involve myself in great matters, or in things too difficult for me. Surely I have composed and quieted my soul like a weaned child rests against his mother. My soul is like a weaned child within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. This is Bruce Winston. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this reading.